Owen Jones is on fire at the moment, and he didn't hold back this week when a caller to Channel 5 blamed Britain's economic woes on the young.
A lot of people like to go after young people and go on about how easy they have it. Young people have been screwed over for ages. Their living standards have been stagnating and falling, unlike previous generations who had a better lot in life than their parents. They're often driven into insecure works where they have to work all ridiculous hours just to live. I'm talking about Deliveroo, I'm talking about Uber, I'm talking about all these precarious jobs where people work massive hours and often get very little pay. They don't have the pensions of your generations. They don't have the security of jobs of your generation either. At the same time, they're often saddled with debt because they went to university, which has become a precondition in this country to getting many jobs. Their lives have become very, very hard. They're working very hard, but their wages are falling and have been falling for the longest period.
Let's let Tony respond. Tony, what do you make of what Owen's just said?
Hold on. When we bought our home, we saved, my wife and myself, we saved, we put deposit down. We went into a house with nothing. All it had got was a cooker and a sink and a fireplace. Nowadays, when they want to buy a house, they want it fully carpeted, fitted kitchens, fitted bedrooms, and they want a 4x4 on the drive. Now, I live opposite a children's nursery, and I see parents turn up here at 8 o'clock in the morning, and they've got Mercedes, BMWs, expensive cars.
So, Tony, I'm sorry. Home ownership has collapsed amongst younger people in this country, not because people have high expectations about having renovated properties. It's because house prices have risen astronomically, and the ratio between the average wage in this country and house prices has massively gone up. So it's just not possible to afford it. And I'm sorry, Tony, again, there's this problem in this country with a lot of political debates where people think the plural of anecdote is data. They think that they've seen something in their street or something, and they think that's British society. Well, I'm sorry, Tony, the evidence doesn't bear up what you're saying, because British workers work some of the longest hours in the whole of Europe, and younger workers in particular are driven into low-paid, often zero-hour contracts where they work lots of hours but get very little back.
That's very well put. I can't believe that guy thinks that people aren't buying houses because they can't, there's all these houses that don't have fitted carpets that we're refusing to buy. We're waiting for the very expensive houses with carpets to come along. Owen mentioned a couple of things I want to pick up on. So the first was about student debt, which for the average new graduate amounts to £40,000. Supporters of tuition fees argue this doesn't function like other debts. It can't make you bankrupt as you pay it through the tax system. But what it does mean is that young graduates pay a much higher tax rate than everyone else. The New Statesman did analysis last year which showed that a graduate with a student loan earning over £26,000 pays a marginal tax rate of 41%. That's made up of a 20% income tax, 12% national insurance, and 9% student loan repayment. For someone without a student loan, the equivalent rate would be 32%. For higher earners, there's a marginal 51% rate for people with a student loan. It's 42% for people without them. So, that's not a high threshold. Once you're earning beyond £26,000, you end up paying 42% marginal tax rate because you've got that 9% student loan repayment. Now, the other point I wanted to pick up on was house prices. Owen rightly argued that the reason our generation can't afford houses isn't because we've suddenly gained very, very expensive taste when it comes to decor. It's instead that they have become much, much, much more expensive. Now, I'm going to show you a stat I have shown you before because I'm a little bit obsessed with it. So this is Waltham Forest. It's the London borough where I come from. Now, in 1997, houses there cost 3.5 times the average yearly wage. By last year, they had gone up to 15.6 times the annual yearly earnings. Now, it's the same story in the rest of London and around much of the country. So the reason I and my schoolmates can't buy houses where we're from isn't because we're more picky than our parents. We like nicer carpets. It's that relative to incomes, houses are 5 times more expensive than they were just 24 years ago. Aaron, how long can this situation go on? And how much of the public do you think are living in the fantasy land of that guy who was calling into Channel 5, where they think that any problems that young people have, whether that be buying houses or moving up the career ladder or whatever it might be, is just down to them being too picky, wanting too nice food, or wanting to decorate their houses nicely?
I mean, Tony's not the sharpest tool in the box, is he? I think there's two arguments here. So either you can say the man's he's a misanthrope, right? He doesn't like other people. And misanthropes will always exist in society. They will always exist. They have always existed. They will always exist. They want to see other people fail. They like doing other people down. They like criticizing. We've all met these people in workplaces, or in our social circles, or at school. Unfortunately, some of you might have them in your family. They just like to be negative and slag other people off, right? He might be like that. But I think as well as that, we're looking at a broader social trend where people like Tony, rather than say, you know what, I'm a member of one of the most fortunate, privileged generations in human history. Let's say you're born in 1945. You've not seen any conflict on the continent of Europe. You've only known rising living standards. You've only known a very robust, powerful welfare state. You likely got on the housing ladder. And of course, many people didn't, but you likely did. You're certainly more likely to have done than your parents, your grandparents. And you've seen generally technological sort of change favor you. You've seen, the West, broadly speaking, keep its power, economic and political power relative to the rest of the world, very, very high. Clearly, all that's falling apart. It's been falling apart for a while. You're seeing the growth, the burgeoning of a middle class in India, China, East Asia. And then, by the way, that could happen and we could still be very, very, very wealthy and we could distribute wealth very well, but we're not doing that. You're seeing rising inequality in Europe and the United States. Now, a lot of that is inflected through age. So people say, we need to talk about capitalism, we need to talk about class, don't talk about age. Well, the facts, right? Like you say, Michael, home ownership has collapsed since 2008. I think it's down, it changed all the time, but I think it's down about 12, 14% from its peak, 2007. But it's particularly bad for the young. People between their mid-30s, mid-40s, I think now are 3 times more likely to rent than they were in 2000. So that's a huge, huge shift for people that really should be owning businesses or senior in businesses, starting families, saving for retirement, the backbone of their community. They're in a position where they can help others out. Those are the very people who now can't even get on the housing ladder. Again, this is just hard fact. And what made me laugh, Michael, was when Tony said, well, when I get up, I see the nursery of the road, all these BMWs, 4x4s. Tony, it means you live in a posh area, mate. That's all it is. So he's tacitly confirming that he bought a property on the cheap, probably in the 70s, and he's probably made a shit ton of money on it because he lives in a nice area where you have a posh nursery. I mean, it's extraordinary, Michael. I in my 20s lived hand to mouth, no money in my bank account because I did a PhD. I hadn't done a PhD, I probably would never have lived like that, but I did live like that. I think a lot of people of our generational cohort know what that's like, a lot. Certainly a lot more than Tony's cohort, by the way. A lot more. When we engage with this crazy mindset that somehow we're asking for more, you just have to ask, well, what's this gentleman going to have to see? In 2010, we don't have food banks in this country. By 2022, millions of people have used food banks. We see rough sleeping on the rise. We see bills on the rise. Fuel's more expensive than ever. Food inflation. So what the hell is he talking about? People have got iPhones. Okay, I can go buy an iPhone 7 or 8 for 150 quid in a secondhand store, Tony. What? That's really competing with getting on the property ladder at 25. What the hell are these people talking about? Personally, I think a lot of it comes from, Michael, the fact that, like I say, the most fortunate generation ever. They really had all the cards in their favor, more so than their grandparents and parents. And it seems now their children and grandchildren. And I think that's driving, for some people, not everyone, but for some people, a lot of guilt. Because rather than say, wow, I'm so fortunate, rather than say that, it's a lot more reassuring if you say, I had to work bloody hard for what I had to achieve. You don't understand how hard I had to work. Because if you've built your sense of self and the image of who you are and why you're valuable as a person on your hard work and your accomplishments, which is totally normal. And then people are saying, well, actually, it's a lot harder for me. Somebody like Tony takes that as a personal blow, an affront. How do we sort of surmount that? I think in many cases, I don't think you can. Personally, I think somebody like Tony is probably beyond reasoning with.